In this video, I'm going to talk about the main types of share-based compensation an employee might receive. And at the time of this video, restricted stock awards and restricted stock units are the most common types of share-based compensation. So I'm going to start with those two. So what's a restricted stock award? Well, it's when a company gives shares of its own stock to an employee as compensation. So the employee is going to receive shares on what is called the grant date. So that's the date in which the employee technically takes ownership of those shares. However, even though the shares are transferred into the employee's name, the shares are often subject to what are called vesting requirements, with the most common vesting requirement being continued employment for a certain period of time. For example, if we take a look at the actual restricted stock award terms here for Walmart, we see that vesting periods for restricted stock are generally between 1 month and 3 years. So let's say that we have a 3-year vesting period for a restricted stock award to the CEO of Walmart. That basically means if that CEO were to quit before the 3 years are up or they get fired, they forfeit the shares. So we're giving you these shares. The shares are being put in your name on the grant date. You're going to get any dividends during the restriction period. You'll get to vote in shareholder elections. However, if you quit, if you get fired, whatever, before the shares vest, before the 3 years are up, in that case, you forfeit the shares. So the CEO would not get to keep the shares. Okay, so vesting based on continued employment for a certain period of time. In some cases, there might be additional vesting requirements. It could be there's some kind of performance condition or a market condition. A performance condition could be you'll get to keep the shares if sales increase by 10%. A market condition would be you get to keep the shares if the stock price reaches this certain threshold. Okay, so there's some kind of vesting requirements, and that's the nature of the restriction on the stock. So we're giving stock to the employee, but you basically, the employee can't just do whatever they want with the stock. They can't just sell the stock immediately. They can't do that until the shares have been vested. So even though with a restricted stock award, the shares go in the employee's name on the grant date, they can't just give the shares away or sell the shares until the shares have been vested. Now, a restricted stock unit is related in the sense that basically the company is granting these shares to an employee as compensation. However, there's a couple caveats, a couple differences. First of all, with a restricted stock unit, the shares are not going in the employee's name on the grant date. Technically, what the employee is getting is the right to receive shares at a later date. Okay, so again, let's say we have a 3-year vesting period for a restricted stock unit. And so the company says, hey, look, we're going to give you some restricted stock units. There's a 3-year vesting period. And so the employee meets the vesting requirements, then they can receive the shares at that point in time. So either way, you might say, well, what's the difference? I don't understand. Either way, the employee's getting the right to receive stock after 3 years, or maybe it's a 4-year vesting period or whatever. Well, it's less administrative hassle with a restrictive stock unit because you're not putting the shares in the employee's name on the grant date. If the employee were to quit or get fired before the shares vest, you have less hassle because you never actually, think about it with a restricted stock award. If you put the shares in the employee's name and then the employee quits 2 weeks later, it's more hassle getting the shares back, right? Because you put them in their name and now you got to tick them out. But with a restricted stock unit, you didn't put the shares in their name immediately, right? You basically said, we'll give you a promise to get shares at a later date. There's another difference with restricted stock unit is some types of restricted stock units also give the employee the option to receive the cash value of the shares. So they could say, look, these shares will vest in 3 years and you'll get, I don't know, let's say, 5,000 shares at that point in time. Or the employee could choose to receive the cash value of the shares. Okay, not all restricted stock units are like that. Some of them it's just, nope, at that certain point in time, you're going to get shares. But some of them give the employee the option to receive cash, in which case the accounting from the employer side, which I'll talk about in a future video, will be different. So in each case, restricted stock award, restricted stock unit, we're offering stock as compensation to the employee. It's just with a restricted stock unit, we're not immediately putting the shares in the employee's name, and the employee might have the option to get cash at a later point in time. Now, stock options have become less common over time as a form of share-based compensation. But there are still companies that give out stock options to executives. And here's an example. Procter & Gamble, they mentioned that they give stock options in addition to, they also have restricted stock units they give out, but it mentions stock options, okay, that they give to employees. So what's a stock option? Well, a stock option, so we're not giving the employee shares, we're giving them the right to buy shares at a certain price. And that price is called the exercise price or the strike price. So, for example, let's say you give a stock option to an employee, and let's just say that you say, you know what, it gives you the option to buy the shares, buy a share at $10. Okay, so that's a strike price. And let's say that when the company gives that option to that employee, that it just so happens that the market price is $10, because often the strike price is set to the market price on the day that the options are granted. So the market price is $10, the strike price is 10. So now in the future, the stock price goes up, it goes up to $50. Now the employee can go and say, you know what, I have the option to buy this share for $10, and now it's worth $50. This sounds like a great deal. Okay, I'm going to exercise the option. I'm going to give the company $10, and I'm going to take a share of stock that's worth $50. So the employee is, of course, hoping that the stock price goes up in value. Then they can buy these shares at the strike price being much lower than the market price. Now, if the market price goes down, let's say it doesn't go up to $50. Let's say it goes down to $7. And then what you can have happen is that the options might expire unused, which means that the employee might say, look, why would I exercise the option to buy the shares for $10 when the market price is now $7? I would be throwing away money. Okay, so if basically the stock price goes down, the employee could be really in a bad spot and say, hey, I don't even want these. There's no reason for me to exercise the options here. So again, here we've got, Procter & Gamble had their options vest after 3 years, and then there's 10-year life. Okay, so there's a certain amount of time where, again, that employee is hoping that stock price goes up, and they say, hey, great, I can exercise my option to buy at the certain price, and which is much lower than what the market price happens to be. Okay, and again, we have vesting requirements and stuff, just like restricted stock awards. So, restricted stock award, you're given stock to the employee, and there's certain restrictions they got to meet. You got to stay employed. Whatever options. Also, we got vesting requirements, but they're given the option to buy at a certain price. Share appreciation rights, aka stock appreciation rights. You're also not, you're basically, it's somewhat similar to options in that the value of the share appreciation rights goes up as the share price goes up. But let me just give you an example of how it could work. So you could say with a share appreciation right, let's say you have one SAR and the current stock price of the company is $20. And let's just say it's structured like this. Let's say, you know what, for every $1 that the share price goes up, we'll give you $1. You're the employee, and we say, the share price goes up so the share price goes up to $26. And you say, hey, great. So now you get $6 cash. Okay, that's just a real simple example of how it could work. The employee receives cash. It might not be dollar for dollar. It might be some other formula, whatever, but it's basically saying, look, if the share price goes up, you're going to get compensation for this. Now, it's generally cash, but it could also be, instead of cash, they would say, we'll give you the equivalent in shares. Like whatever that cash that you would get, we'll give you like the same amount, but in shares of the company stock. So the employee gets these share appreciation rights. They're hoping the stock price goes up. And like I said, in most situations, they're going to get some kind of cash payout based on the appreciation in the company stock. And share appreciation rights generally subject to vesting requirements. And here we've got Apple. They mentioned that stock appreciation rights are a form of compensation that they give out. Now, employee share purchase plans, okay, these work a little differently. So what employee share purchase plan is it's saying to employees, hey, look, you can buy stock directly from the company, and we'll give you some kind of deal. We'll give you some favorable terms. For example, I looked up an employee share purchase plan for the company Microsoft, and they've got some details about it here if you're curious. But basically it says, look, you can buy, if you're an employee, you can buy shares at 90% of the market price on certain dates. So let's just say, just to give you an idea how this works, let's say that the closing price for Microsoft on one of those dates was $400. Well, 90% of that is 360. So it's basically saying to an employee, hey, if the market price of Microsoft is 400, you could buy it for 360. Like, we'll let you buy a share from us for 360. So obviously that there's basically cutting a deal to the employee on the stock. Now, it's not always a 10% discount. It could be 15%. It could be 8%, 7, 5, whatever. It could also be some kind of a matching situation where the company says, look, for every 20 shares that you buy of our stock, we'll go and we'll give you like an additional share. So you buy 20 shares, we give you 21. So it's giving an incentive to the employees to purchase stock from the company. So these are all different types of ways that a company could provide compensation to their employees, somehow based on the value of the company's shares. And I'm going to talk about how these are accounted for from the employer side in the videos to come.